Hi everyone, it's Katrina. Number 10. Francois L'Olonnais. Francois L'Olonnais is considered by almost every historian to be the cruelest buccaneer who ever lived. He had a ferocious temper, committed terrible atrocities, and brutalized his prisoners in ways that other pirates never did. We have to go back to the beginning when his given name was Jean-David Nau. Born in France in 1635, he was originally sold to a master as a young child, taken to the Caribbean, and held there as a servant until 1660. And that was when he joined the buccaneers stationed at Saint-Domingue. He had been a servant all his life and had grown up with plenty of nastiness. The opportunity to get on a pirate ship and rob and kill Spaniards was just too good to pass up. After working himself up through the ranks, Francois was given his very own ship to command. And when he started off on his own, he had a very specific way that he did business. He killed every single person on the ships he plundered as a matter of pirate principle. And he even started organizing land attacks, not just focusing on naval thievery. Francois teamed up with another pirate named Michel de Basco. Together, they raised an army of about 600 pirates spread across 8 ships. They then went through the Gulf of Venezuela and attacked cities indiscriminately. They killed thousands of people, tortured citizens, and burned whole towns to the ground. The only issue is that the loot wasn't very good because these were poor rural villages along the coast. They didn't have any treasure. Most of the pirates ended up leaving, and then Francois tried to take over all of Nicaragua. But on his way there in 1668, he was captured by a group of indigenous people, and they knew exactly who he was. So they cut the pirate into pieces and burned him. Number 9. Sir Henry Morgan. Sir Henry Morgan is the same captain you're probably thinking of, the guy on the Captain Morgan rum bottle. But Morgan didn't start out as a rum-drinking pirate. He began his naval career as a wealthy privateer operating in the Caribbean. He later became the governor of Jamaica, and after that, a bloodthirsty pirate. But Captain Morgan was a more refined pirate than many of those active back in the 1600s. The captain was a political man, a military leader, and something of a strategic genius. He also hated the Spanish. Morgan didn't turn to piracy only for the sake of getting rich, although it certainly helped. His ultimate goal was to damage the Spanish Empire, and that's exactly what he did. For 20 years, Captain Morgan hurt the Spanish wherever he could. One of his most famous attacks was in the city of Portobelo in 1668. Morgan besieged the city with a massive force of buccaneers. Portobelo was a huge treasure port for Spain, where they kept mass amounts of silver that was being gathered from mines in South America. Morgan had only 2 ships and 700 men. He used those ships to distract the Spaniards that were manning the fortresses, while he secretly landed 500 men a couple of miles away from the major town. Since the Spanish were expecting to be attacked from the sea, they never expected the small army coming up from the town to their fortress. But here's what was so especially brutal about it. When the pirates came up from the town, they had prisoners with them, specifically women, priests, nuns, children, and they used these people as human shields. Number 8. Chen Yi Sao. One pirate you may not have heard of is Chen Yi Sao, a brutal female pirate from China who dominated the coastlines of Asia between 1795 and 1810. Not only was she a fierce buccaneer and one of the most successful wealthy pirates of all time, but she was basically a pirate queen. At her peak, she was in command of over 70,000 pirates spread across 1,200 vessels. That was a force larger than the Spanish Armada. If Chen had been so inclined, she probably could have defeated the Spanish and British at sea and left their operations in the Caribbean and South and Central America completely crippled. What makes her so fascinating is how she pulled this huge pirate army together. She started her career as a pirate after leaving her job as a lady of the night. She then married a pirate and joined him at sea. Together, they organized rogue pirate gangs into one main confederation. When her husband died suddenly and mysteriously, Chen Yi Sao quickly became known as the almighty ruler of the Pirate Confederation and squashed any potential squabbles for power. During her brief time as a commander, she caused terror all along the coast of China, robbing, killing, and selling humans into slavery. She only stopped when things felt like they could fall apart, but she didn't hide off on some island and bury her treasure. She demanded a pardon from the Chinese government. They gave her one, and she spent the rest of her life running a small smuggling racket inside a gambling house on the mainland. She lived to be almost 70 years old. Number 7. Charles Vane. Charles Vane had a career of about 5 years. We know little about his early life other than he was probably born around 1680 somewhere in England. After a brief naval career, Charles moved to Nassau, put together a small crew of pirates, and started looting. But his career was brief and bloody. He was cruel in his dealings with prisoners, and when he took a ship, he didn't just tie people up or throw them overboard. He would beat, torture, and then kill the sailors in the worst ways imaginable. He even had a chance to step away from piracy in 1718 when the king offered him a pardon. Charles agreed to take the pardon, but immediately went right back to his life of crime. Then, in 1719, Charles got caught in a storm. He was marooned on an uncharted island and was later discovered by a passing British ship. Sadly for him, they knew exactly who he was and brought him straight to Port Royal. He spent the next 2 years in a jail cell before ultimately being hanged in March 1721. Number 6. Captain Kidd. Captain William Kidd had some of the worst luck of any pirate who ever sailed the high seas. He had the unfortunate luck of being born at the very end of the golden age of piracy. Pirates had just enjoyed a very long run of moderate freedom and success, but all of that was ending. This made Captain Kidd one of the very last legitimate pirates before the world moved on. The captain started out as a successful privateer in the 1690s while England and France were at war. Kidd was charged with defending trade routes going from America to England. He was also tasked with combating pirates in the Indian Ocean. His mission was to rid the sea of piracy once and for all. And if he had to destroy some enemy ships and secure their valuable cargo to do it, that was what he would do. The very first pirate he tried to capture was Robert Culliford in 1696. Unfortunately, Captain Kidd wasn't actually that great at finding pirates. After a long time at sea with nothing happening, his crew turned on him. They mutinied and forced Kidd to give up his search for the pirate and become a pirate himself. In 1698, they attacked a merchant vessel and stole its cargo of silk, sugar, and opium. What Captain Kidd didn't know was that in those 2 years he'd been gone, the mood had changed in England regarding piracy. Pirates were to be completely eradicated, and stealing from another ship was now a criminal act. When he arrived in the West Indies in 1699, they were hunting pirates like witches. Kidd buried some of his treasure on Gardiner's Island and Block Island, then was arrested on July 7, 1699, when he landed in Boston. He was found guilty of murder and piracy and hanged on May 23, 1701. He'd only ever stolen 1 load of cargo, and had only done it because he failed at being a pirate hunter. Would you rather have been a pirate or a pirate hunter? Let me know in the comments below. Number 5. Black Bart. Black Bart, whose real name was John Roberts, was one of the most successful pirates the world has ever seen. We don't know the exact numbers, but most historians agree he plundered somewhere around 400 ships during his career. The main reason he was so successful was that he was brutal, bold, and fearless. He would terrorize every ship that he encountered while sailing through the Caribbean Sea, even ships that were obviously far superior to his. He would go up against warships and the most fearsome vessels that most pirates would avoid at all costs. And like most pirates, he had a real mean streak of violence in him. They called him Black Bart because his heart was as black as coal. He once captured a slaving ship with 80 slaves shackled down in the hull. Rather than save the slaves, or at least let them go, he burned the ship with them still on board. He was an absolutely heinous person, and he met his death soon after in 1722 at the end of a noose. Number 4. Calico Jack. John Rackham, also known by his nickname Calico Jack, is most famous for being the guy who came up with the pirate flag. Its real name is the Jolly Roger flag, and it's probably one of the most famous flags in the world. The skull and 2 crossed swords, or the skull and crossbones, is the sign of piracy in nearly every single place you go in the world. John Rackham was a rather unusual man, a pirate who terrorized ships around the Bahamas and Cuba. He is famous these days because he was one of the few pirate captains who had 2 female pirates on his crew, Mary Read and Anne Bonny. He's also famous because he was a pretty terrible pirate. Most of his plundering was done on tiny ships close to the shore. In 1719, he captured the Kingston, which had a massive cargo. But because he was caught in the act, bounty hunters came and took the loot away, and Rackham was nearly killed. Calico Jack only wriggled his way out of being hung by lying to the governor of Nassau and saying that Charles Vane, a different pirate, had forced him to steal that cargo. This was around the time he started having an affair with Anne Bonny, the wife of a sailor who worked for the governor. When he found out about the affair, Anne and Calico Jack ran away and sailed around the Caribbean for 2 months, capturing ships where they could. But in 1720, Rackham was finally captured in Jamaica and hanged. Number 3. Jean Lafitte. Jean Lafitte was a pirate from 1810 to 1820 who liked to do his pillaging in the Gulf of Mexico. He set himself up with a secluded base in Barataria Bay, south of New Orleans. It was hidden behind shallow waterways and deep in the bayou, which made him almost impossible to find. It was also close enough to New Orleans that he could easily take his cargo there to be sold. It was from his secret base that Lafitte put together a massive team of smugglers and pirates. Because this was just after the golden age of piracy, this wasn't as much about looting and stealing as it was about selling goods and humans. And that's what made Jean Lafitte such a dirty scoundrel. He was basically a slave trader who kept people stuck in pens on Grand Terre Island, then dragged them through the swamps to be sold at secret auctions in Louisiana. It would be Andrew Jackson who eventually employed Jean Lafitte and his pirates in the War of 1812. The pirates were a major part of defending New Orleans in 1815. Thanks to the help of these bloodthirsty pirates, New Orleans was spared, and the British had no choice but to retreat. After the battle, Lafitte and his crew went right back to attacking merchant ships and harassing the Spanish Empire. They had extreme success until 1821, when U.S. authorities had had enough. Understanding that his days of crime were at an end, Lafitte took his most loyal men and fled the United States. And to this day, no one knows what became of him. Number 2. Hayreddin Barbarossa. Hayreddin Barbarossa was born sometime in the 1470s on the island of Lesbos. This island is in the Aegean Sea, currently a part of Greece, but until 1912 it was under Turkish dominion. Barbarossa, which is Italian for Redbeard, worked with his brother to become major pirates in the Mediterranean. When Spain completed their takeover of Granada in 1492, both Spain and Portugal attacked the North African coast with plans of taking over Africa piece by piece. This angered the Barbarossa brothers, and so they started pillaging the Spanish and Portuguese ships and causing harm wherever they could. They were absolutely aggressive to the Spanish and even took over the city of Algiers. Back in Turkey, the Ottomans realized they could use these pirates to their advantage against their enemies, and so the Barbarossa brothers went from pirates to government-funded navy men. They used their skills as pirates on behalf of the Ottoman Empire. Barbarossa's brother died in 1518 in a battle with the Spanish, but Hayreddin made a major name for himself. He eventually became Grand Admiral of the Ottoman Empire. Number 1. Blackbeard. When you think about scary pirates, the first name that probably pops into your head is Blackbeard. And while he was probably the most feared pirate of the 18th century and the most famous pirate in history, he may not have actually been that brutal. 300 years after Edward Teach had his head chopped off in battle, historians and archaeologists have come together to shed some light on the man behind the mystery. Many merchants in the 1700s spoke of Blackbeard as if he were a vengeful demon. He had fierce and wild eyes, kept 3 pistols in a holster across his chest, and kept lit matches in his beard to make it look like a hot, glowing mass of hair. The truth is, Edward Teach was an extremely well-educated man from a family of serious notoriety, although we don't actually know who that family was. We know that he was wealthy, had an education, and that he was smarter than most pirates. Regardless of his background, he turned to piracy around the year 1715 and was dead 3 years later. He was killed in battle after being ambushed by the Virginia governor at the time, Alexander Spotswood. And while Blackbeard had a reputation as being a vicious pirate, there wasn't any evidence that he ever killed anyone. Historians believe he simply scared people into thinking he was terrifying, and this worked to his advantage. He made sailors so scared they would rather jump into the ocean than face him. Thanks for watching! Who's your favorite pirate? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. See you next time for more amazing history. Bye!